You didn't just sleep with your daughter, you married her. Jasmine didn't shout, she didn't blink, but 102 million people did, all at once. A senator choked on his breath. An aide fainted. The room dropped 30 decibels in one heartbeat. On the desk, a marriage license, a honeymoon receipt, and a necklace inscribed I plus D equals forever. 13 years of silence, $2 billion to bury it, one sentence to end it all. And for the first time in U.S. history, the first daughter was legally the first lady. And the president just lost the room. For 3 seconds, the silence was holy. Then it became radioactive. Flashes burst from press cameras like warning shots. Aides scrambled to secure documents. One senator muttered, "Jesus Christ," under his breath. Another whispered, "Is this real?" But Jasmine Crockett was already standing. She wasn't trembling, she wasn't sweating. She was waiting, not for order, but for surrender. Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States, blinked. Then he smirked, leaned forward on the oak panel desk with both hands. His voice didn't echo. It slithered. "Well," he said, slow as a knife, "you finally got your little moment, huh? You walk in here with your big hair, your big mouth, and your little paper, thinking you're Harriet Tubman with a Harvard degree." Laughter bubbled from a corner, quickly swallowed, but he didn't stop. "You're not justice. You're noise in a cheap wig with a law degree. And this?" He gestured toward the monitors. "This is performance art for the people too poor to matter." He sat back, arms crossed like a tyrant, bored of his gesture. "You think America cares about a piece of paper from Malta? You think anyone outside this room believes for one goddamn second that I—" He raised both hands in air quotes. "Married my daughter?" Murmurs returned, some in disbelief, some in fear, some in something darker, recognition. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She simply reached down, opened her leather folder, and pulled out a crimson envelope. No label, no seal, just weight. She placed it on the desk between them, gently, like laying flowers on a grave. "This isn't a debate," she said. Her voice was silk dragged across steel. "It's a reckoning." Trump scoffed. "Oh, please," but she was already peeling the flap. "You see, Mr. President, I didn't bring a scandal. I brought your vows." She removed the document with surgical precision, unfolded it, rotated it so every camera, every senator, every pair of eyes could see. Across the top, in official Maltese script, it read, "Marriage certificate, civil union, Malta Republic, Donald John Trump and Ivanka Marie Trump, dated August 4th, 2012. The room convulsed. Audible gasps rippled across the chamber like aftershocks. One aide dropped his phone. Another ran out vomiting. A judge from the ethics subcommittee paled visibly and gripped his chest. Trump didn't move. But the color drained from his face like a sinking flag. Jasmine's voice was calm, calculated, unforgiving. This document was authenticated by the Maltese Ministry of Justice 3 weeks ago, cross-referenced with entry records from Trump's private jet logs, matched with financial transfers from a hidden offshore account titled Sovereign Pearl, $2.1 billion in a single wire 2 days after the marriage. She paused, then leaned in. "The witness signature belongs to your former Secretary of Defense. He resigned 1 week later." Trump opened his mouth, closed it. She turned the page. Behind it, a photograph. Blurred, secretly taken, but unmistakable. Ivanka in a red dress placing a ring on Donald Trump's finger. A priest, a beach, a scarlet veil. The entire nation was now watching, live, unfiltered, unforgiving. "You didn't just break your oath to your country," Jasmine said. "You rewrote it in blood." Trump's fingers twitched. "That's fake." "Then sue Malta," she said. "They're waiting." He stood. "This is slander. This is truth with a timestamp. Ivanka would never—" "She did," She signed and she stayed silent for 13 years until we subpoenaed her medical records, her tax filings, and her travel itinerary. And all roads, every single one, led to that red veil and that cursed vow. The gavel struck, but it wasn't Jasmine's doing. It was the chairman of the committee, visibly shaken. Order, he whispered. God help us. Order. But Jasmine didn't stop. There are more documents, she said. There is a witness. There is an account. There is a child. Gasps again. And if you want to scream fake news, Mr. President, do it under oath. Do it in court. Do it before the American people who just watched their leader marry his own bloodline. Trump stepped back. The camera zoomed in. His eyes searched the room like a man no longer looking for escape, but for oxygen. Jasmine Crockett stood still, composed, deadly. You want to make this a performance, she said. Fine. Curtains up. And in that moment, no one doubted it anymore. The President of the United States wasn't just losing power. He was losing the country. The chamber was still in shock when the lights dimmed, deliberately. Jasmine's legal counsel handed a sealed USB to the committee chair, who hesitated for only half a second before inserting it into the display terminal. The screens lining the hearing walls flickered once, then twice, then held. The video began without sound, a handheld shot, slightly shaky, tropical dusk, the ocean a deep, bleeding blue, waves crashing softly in the distance, like they too were trying to drown the moment. A private beachfront villa in Malta, the kind reserved for royalty or fugitives. Then the camera turned, and there they were. Donald Trump, in a cream linen suit, older but smiling, hair swept back, sunglasses in hand. Standing next to him, Ivanka Trump. Red dress, bare shoulders, no veil, no crowd, just her. And a single man in white clerical robes holding a small leather book. The officiant. The room watching in Washington held its collective breath. The video cut to a new angle, closer, cleaner, likely from a mounted camera inside the villa. The trio stood on a glass platform overlooking the sea. The priest's voice came into focus, accented, calm, deliberate. Do you, Donald John Trump, take Ivanka Marie Trump as your eternal partner in life, legacy, and sovereignty, forsaking all titles, names, and worldly attachments in service of this covenant? Trump didn't pause. I do. Gasps shot through the hearing. Jasmine didn't turn her head. She'd already memorized this part. Every syllable, every horror. The officiant turned to Ivanka. And do you, Ivanka Marie Trump, take this man, your father by birth, your sovereign by choice, as your sacred bond beyond law, beyond nation, beyond time? Ivanka's lips moved, barely audible but clear. I do. The air in the hearing room evaporated. The screen faded to black. A title appeared. Private recording, AOG 4, 2000 Santorini Villa, Malta. Then the final line, not from the priest, but from Trump himself, whispered, caught off mic, as he slid the ring onto her finger. This is not sin. This is succession. Someone in the room screamed. Another sobbed. The chairman rose to his feet, trembling. A gavel hit the desk once. Not for order, but because he couldn't find any other sound to make. Jasmine stepped forward, holding a printed document high. This, she said, voice unwavering, is the certified English translation of the Maltese marriage certificate, notarized, stamped, and verified through diplomatic channels. It matches travel logs from Air Trump, security clearance requests, and a series of encrypted financial transactions authorized from the White House internal accounts on August 6th, just 48 hours after the ceremony. She handed the copy to the committee chair. The camera zoomed in on the text. Certificate of Union, Donald John Trump and Ivanka Marie Trump. Legal under Republic Law, Article 17 today, for adult, non-restricted mutual sovereignty agreements. The ink was dry. The truth was wet with horror. Trump stood frozen, Lips parted, no words, no denial, no rage, just something colder, recognition. Not that he was caught, but that it was now public. It was real and uncontained. Jasmine continued, Mr. President, this isn't a relic. It's not a foreign misunderstanding. This is a legal, intentional act, orchestrated under diplomatic obscurity, cloaked in offshore legality, and protected by executive privilege. You didn't just marry your daughter in secret. You weaponized that marriage to funnel state power into a private empire built on one sacred lie, that the throne is always inherited, never earned. The room stirred, not just in shock, in moral nausea. She looked up, eyes sharp, voice quieter now, deadlier. Ivanka Trump was never the advisor. She was the vessel, the vault, the crown you didn't trust anyone else to wear. A senator slammed his folder shut and stood. This is madness. Jasmine turned slowly toward him. No, this is monarchy in disguise, baby. She faced Trump again. You desecrated the office, the oath, and the order. You replaced democracy with dynasty. And now, she raised her hand toward the screen, where Ivanka's silent smile lingered, frozen in time, like a painting cursed by the truth. Now the world gets to decide if they want a republic or a royal bloodline in denial. Trump stepped back. His heel hit the chair. He didn't fall, but something inside him did. And Jasmine Crockett, calm, deliberate, undefeated, folded the marriage certificate in half, placed it back into the red envelope, and whispered only for the mic. You gave her your ring. Now give us your resignation. The moment hit like a detonation without sound. Not a single senator moved. Trump remained standing, but his posture had hollowed, as if gravity had remembered who he truly was beneath the title. Cameras held the frame on his face, drained, frozen, exposed. But the next twist wasn't on screen. It was missing. An aide slid a folder to the committee chair, who turned a page and stopped breathing. Jasmine looked toward him. Do it, she said. It's time. The chair tapped the mic. We now enter into sealed supplemental disclosure concerning the First Lady. That phrase alone shook the room. For 6 months, Washington had asked why Melania Trump hadn't been seen. No events, no addresses, no formal photos, no statements. The White House insisted she was resting, working privately, attending to family. But what played next shattered every fiction. The screen changed, a still image, security camera footage. Zurich Airport, 6 months prior. Melania, no escort, no Secret Service visible. Alone, large sunglasses, black coat, walking slowly but purposefully toward a private jet hangar. The narrator's voice, AI-enhanced from recovered NSA briefings, came through. First Lady Melania Trump departed Washington on February 3rd via an unscheduled flight listed under the diplomatic manifest M. Knavs, Cultural Outreach. Another still, boarding gate logs, flight destination undisclosed, airline chartered. Another clip, that same aircraft taking off without transponder codes registered to any inbound return. Then came the audio, grainy at first, then sharpened. Melania's voice, a private phone recording. He never loved me. I was just a silhouette to cover what he truly loved. When I found the necklace, when I found her wedding ring in his drawer, I knew I was never the wife. I was the alibi. The room was ice. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Jasmine didn't blink. He called her my legacy. He called me convenient. So I left. I will not go back. I will not die for this performance. The screen faded. There were no credits, just silence. Jasmine stepped forward. We traced her route, she said, voice slow and cold. She landed in Vienna, then Zurich. After that, nothing, not a single trace, no customs records, no social trace. It's as if the First Lady of the United States erased herself. The committee chair spoke without looking up. Do we believe she's in hiding? Jasmine nodded. No, we believe she was running. Trump finally spoke. Hoarse, raw, desperate. She left because she's sick, that's all. She didn't want the media circus. But Jasmine was already holding up a new document. Then why, she asked, did she empty 3 accounts totaling $274 million, withdraw her Slovenian passport, charter a diplomatic jet under a false name, and deactivate every device tied to her security clearance? Trump didn't respond. Jasmine continued. We believe Melania Trump left not to escape scrutiny, but to escape him. Because she knew what was coming. Because she knew the red envelope was only the beginning. And because she understood, maybe before any of us, that this wasn't a scandal. She paused, then delivered it, clean and lethal. This was a system with roles, and she was tired of playing hers. Somewhere near the back, a young aide, barely out of law school, whispered, "She vanishes like a ghost." Another answered, "No, like a survivor." Jasmine lowered her voice now, but it didn't lose force. Melania tried to warn us, not with speeches, not with protests, but with her absence. She withdrew from the performance before it killed her. She left her silence as a message. And now we've heard it. Trump's hand slammed the desk. This is slander. No, Jasmine replied. This is your wife running for her life. Another screen blinked to life. A final clip. This one unreleased until this very moment. Private security cam. Melania in the Zurich terminal, moments before boarding. She turned back to look at the lens. Just a second. Just enough. Eyes empty, face calm, and then the faintest trace of a smile. Not warm, not free, resigned. Then she disappeared into the jet bridge and never came back. But Melania's vanishing wasn't the end. It was the ignition. Because silence that complete, especially from the First Lady of the United States, is never just emotional. It's institutional. Something bigger always follows. And it did. Jasmine Crockett waited until the room had absorbed the final frame of Melania's escape. Then, without a word, she opened the next tab in the committee's classified database. The screen lit up in white and gold. Title: Sovereign Pearl. Discretionary Trust Ledger. Beneath it, a number so large it felt fictional. $2,147,000 transferred in a single block. Date: August 6, 2012, 2 days after the Malta wedding. Jasmine turned to the committee, her voice as sharp as bone through silk. This is the first payment, she said. Not the only one, but the first, and the one that tells us everything. She stepped closer to the screen. One tap revealed transaction metadata. The routing bank, Meridian Federal, based in Bermuda. Origin account masked behind 7 shell corporations. But the path had been unraveled by forensic auditors. The money came from a classified White House contingency fund authorized only by the executive branch. And the signatory? Donald J. Trump. The room exhaled in disbelief. One senator leaned forward and whispered, "He paid her." Another replied, "No, he bought her." Jasmine continued, Sovereign Pearl was not just a trust, it was a firewall created for one purpose: to seal, sustain, and silence a union that could never be public, but had to be protected. The beneficiary? Ivanka Marie Trump, listed under code name Eminence. She clicked again. A list of disbursements unfurled. Luxury properties. Interim international defense contracts. A consulting retainer for a strategic ethics advisor in Dubai. But what mattered more wasn't what it bought. It was who it bought. Line item 117, $11.3 million Senate Majority Whip, classified consultancy fee. Line item 211, $8.4 million, former Joint Chiefs Liaison, Global Discretion Agreement. Line item 305, $6.7 million National Intelligence Officer, Archival Redaction Services. Line item 331, $4.9 million Supreme Court Intermediary, off-book procedural guidance. The amounts varied. The message did not. These weren't allies, they were accessories. Jasmine Oz looked up. There were 4 high-ranking officials who received direct payments from Sovereign Pearl within 30 days of the wedding. Not gifts, not fees, contracts, each designed to keep what happened in Malta locked in a vault of silence, institutional, legal, and historical. One senator slammed his hand on the table. This can't be real. It's authenticated, she said. The wirepaths match. The receipts are notarized. The digital ledger is time-stamped, air-gapped, and mirrored across 3 forensic clouds. And the initials beside each payout match the initials of the men who said nothing when we asked about the president's absence that week. The chairman leaned forward, voice tight. You're accusing 4 senior federal officers of accepting hush money to cover an incestuous marriage? No, Jasmine said. I'm accusing them of accepting hush money to legitimize it. There was no rebuttal, just the quiet, growing dread of comprehension. Jasmine tapped the screen one last time. Up came a scanned document, glossy, embossed, signed. A founding letter from the Sovereign Pearl Trust. The mission statement read, to ensure continuity of vision beyond term limits, elections, or mortal interference. And beneath that, Trump's signature. He didn't just want a legacy, Jasmine said. He wanted a monarchy, and he was willing to pay for it. With your tax dollars, your silence, and your constitution. The silence in the room cracked, not with speech, but with conscience. One of the senators named in the ledger stood and left without a word. Another asked for a brief recess, then never returned. But Jasmine remained, holding the screen like a blade, holding the truth like a weapon. And somewhere in the West Wing, according to a live audio intercept just released, Donald Trump was heard screaming the same 3 words into an unsecured phone line. Shut it down. But it was too late. The ledger was public. The wire trails were permanent. And Sovereign Pearl was no longer a vault. It was a confession. The chair tapped the microphone again. His voice trembled, but his resolve didn't. Our next witness, summoned under Section 6 of the Emergency Disclosure Act, is Mr. Jared Corey Kushner. The double doors creaked open. Jared walked in, dark suit, pale face, no smile. The room stiffened as he approached the table. He didn't look at the cameras, didn't look at Jasmine, but his hands betrayed him, twitching slightly, as if remembering a moment they never got to change. He raised his right hand, took the oath, sat. The chair asked the formal question. Mr. Kushner, were you aware of any legally binding union between your father-in-law, Donald J. Trump, and your wife, Ivanka Marie Trump? Jared didn't flinch. No. You were not aware of a wedding in Malta? No. You were not aware of a financial trust named Sovereign Pearl? I was aware of the trust. I wasn't aware of its purpose. Jasmine leaned forward. Let's not waste time, Mr. Kushner. He still didn't look at her. We have offshore banking logs that show you personally reviewed the disbursement protocol. You co-signed an ethics waiver to move $400 million under an alias tied to the trust. It was a blind asset movement. Was it also blind when you signed a privacy non-disclosure agreement with the Republic of Malta the same week of the wedding? I wasn't told what it was about. Jasmine tapped the screen. Play it. The speakers crackled, then cleared. A male voice, low, flat, weary. I chose to shut up. She chose to survive. Jared closed his eyes. His chest rose, fell, slowly. The voice continued. I saw the vows. I saw the ring. I saw the priest. I saw him. And I did nothing. A pause. Because if I opened my mouth, I'd vanish like Melania. The room erupted, not with noise, with tension, with heads snapping toward Jared, with gasps slipping between clenched teeth. One senator leaned back as if Jared had become radioactive. Another whispered, God, he knew. Jared remained still, but the stillness wasn't control anymore. It was collapse in disguise. Jasmine stood. That recording was recovered from a private signal call made by you to your former chief of staff. It was sent from a secure location in Jordan 2 months ago. The metadata is verified. The voice is yours. The timeline matches your diplomatic absence. Jared finally looked at her, and for the first time since he entered the room, his voice broke. She came to me, Jasmine, Ivanka. She told me she was scared. She said he didn't see her as his daughter anymore. He saw her as his inheritance. Jasmine let him speak. I told her to walk away. She said she couldn't, that he had something on her, on us, on everyone. He looked down, shoulders sinking, then quieter. I saw the wedding photos. A week after. She didn't cry in them. She didn't smile either. She just existed. The committee chair interrupted. Did you ever confront the president? Jared nodded. I asked him if it was true. And what did he say? Jared swallowed. He smiled and said, every empire starts with blood. The rest is just paperwork. The room froze. Jasmine stepped forward, measured and exact. Mr. Kushner, did the president threaten you? Jared didn't hesitate. Yes. How? His voice cracked, barely audible. He told me, stay quiet or join Melania. A wave of horror swept through the room like a silent avalanche. Every senator now saw it not as a scandal, but a structure, a system, an architecture of loyalty built with silence, bribery, and fear. Jared looked up. His eyes were glass. I stayed quiet because I thought protecting Ivanka meant protecting the country, but I realized now it only protected him. He turned toward the cameras for the first time. I'm sorry. Jasmine didn't nod, didn't smile, just spoke. Sorry doesn't undo it, but truth begins something that silence never could. Then she stepped back as the chair called for a 5-minute recess, and the world, watching live, saw not just a broken man at a table, they saw the dam finally crack. But what spilled next wasn't just water, it was blood. When the session resumed, the atmosphere was no longer political. It was surgical, cold, precise. Like everyone knew, the next incision would cut deeper than any before. Jasmine Crockett returned to the center of the chamber with a different kind of folder. Thinner, worn, red at the edges, like something once hidden behind heat. She didn't speak at first. She just looked to the side door and gave a single nod. It opened. A girl stepped through, no older than 15, long, dark coat, pale skin, blonde hair pulled tightly back. She moved like someone who had been trained to disappear and had just now decided not to. The room leaned in. Jasmine waited until she reached the witness table, then softly, state your name. The girl looked at the microphone, then at Jasmine. Her voice was soft but unshakable. Valentina. Do you have a last name, Valentina? No, she said. I never did. A pause. Gasps didn't come this time. Only dread. Jasmine lifted the folder. This is a certified copy of Valentina's birth certificate, issued in Monaco, June 2009. Her mother is listed as Ivanka Marie Trump. The father field is left blank. The room bristled, but no one interrupted. Jasmine continued. This document was cross-verified by the consulate, hospital records, embassy logs, but what matters most is what wasn't written. She turned to the next page, an unsealed envelope folded once. Inside, a DNA test. This test was performed 3 weeks ago under court-ordered protocol with samples from Valentina and an anonymous comparative subject collected through subpoena. She lifted the final sheet. Result, 99.9987% parental match. She looked up. Donald J. Trump, biological father. Trump's chair groaned as he shifted, but he didn't speak. His jaw clenched. His eyes locked on Valentina, like recognition was a punishment, but she didn't look away. Jasmine stepped back. She's not here for drama. She's not here for pity. She's here because she exists, and her existence is the final indictment. The chair cleared his throat. Miss Valentina, did you know who your father was before today? She shook her head. No, I only knew I wasn't allowed to ask. What do you mean? She stared forward, eyes steady. My mother told me I was special, that I was born for a reason. But every time I asked why I didn't have a last name, she'd say, names make noise. You were born to be quiet. Jasmine's hands curled against the desk. Valentina continued. I grew up inside a villa with no address. Tutors came and went. Guards changed every 3 weeks. I wasn't allowed phones, or birthdays, or mirrors. One senator whispered, My God. Jasmine nodded toward the monitors. You were hidden. I was stored, Valentina said, like something breakable. A beat passed, then Jasmine spoke the words that had been carved into the underside of this entire investigation. You didn't break the law, Mr. President. You broke the bloodline into itself. The chamber didn't erupt. It caved. There were no arguments now, no defenses, only the sound of pages being turned. Eyes refusing to rise. History catching up to itself. Trump stood suddenly. She's not mine. Jasmine answered without raising her voice. She is, and so is the silence you paid for. Trump pointed at Valentina, voice shaking. This is manipulation. This is political theater. But she looked at him now, finally, thank you for the first time. And she said the words the nation didn't know it had been waiting to hear. You looked at me once, at the villa. You called me the insurance policy. You said I wasn't a daughter. I was a backup. Trump froze. You said I'd never inherit, but I'd always remember. The room cracked in half. Jasmine stepped beside him. No child is a scandal, Mr. President, but hiding her was. She placed the DNA result on the table. And now that she's seen, you don't get to pretend she doesn't exist. Valentina didn't cry. She just leaned into the mic. I don't want your name. I want it gone. And across every screen in America, the question was no longer, did he marry his daughter? It was this. What kind of nation survives a father like that? The room didn't exhale. It waited, like a wound unsure whether the next cut would bleed or burn. Jasmine Crockett stood still as the chair cleared his throat and read the next name. The committee now calls Ivanka Marie Trump to testify in closed executive session. The media feed cut, the doors shut. Say, what followed would never be broadcast, but would echo louder than any camera ever could. She entered quietly, no makeup, no jewelry, no heels. Just a black suit, her hair tied back in a tight knot like she was preparing for trial or burial. Maybe both. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes were not. They had seen too much for too long and were still learning how to blink again. Jasmine didn't speak right away. She let the silence stretch until it wrapped around Ivanka's throat. Then gently, Miss Trump, were you married to your father? Ivanka blinked, swallowed. No. Jasmine nodded once slowly. Did you attend a private ceremony in Malta in August of 2012? I accompanied him on a diplomatic trip. Was there a priest present? There was a celebration. Was there a ring? Ivanka looked down. It was symbolic. Jasmine stepped forward. You wore a red dress. Ivanka's voice tightened. It was a family occasion. Jasmine opened a folder, smaller than the others, but heavier. She held up a handwritten letter, cream paper, gold trim. Do you recognize this? Ivanka paused. Her lips trembled. She didn't answer. Jasmine continued. This letter was found in a sealed file titled, For Jared Only, stored on a private server in a Trump Organization satellite office in Prague. She read aloud, I said yes to silence, not to sickness. I let him turn legacy into loyalty. But not once did I say I was proud. If this letter surfaces, it means the mask is cracking. If it does, tell Valentina. I'm sorry I made her a secret. I didn't say I do. I said please stop. The chamber froze. Ivanka looked like glass about to shatter. Jasmine laid the letter on the table in front of her. You wrote that, didn't you? Ivanka didn't answer. She reached forward, fingers trembling, and touched the edge of the paper like it might disappear if she held it too tightly. Then her voice broke. I did. It came out like a breath held for a decade. I wrote it a week after Malta. I was alone. Jared had left. Melania wouldn't look at me. My father kept saying it was just ceremony, that it wasn't real unless I told the world. Tears welled but didn't fall. He told me I was preserving the bloodline. He told me I was chosen. But I wasn't chosen. I was cornered. Jasmine let the silence fall gently this time. Ivanka continued, voice cracking. I didn't know about the trust fund until years later. I didn't want money. I wanted my name back. She glanced at the letter again. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw him, not just because he was my father, but because I had become what he needed, a legacy, a crown, a cover. Finally, the tears came. I loved him. I wanted to love him, but he didn't love me back. He loved what I meant to his power. He loved the image. He married the symbol, not the daughter. Jasmine stepped closer. And the ceremony? Ivanka nodded slowly. He said it wouldn't matter unless it leaked. He said the world doesn't care what happens in private, only in public. She looked up, voice rising just above a whisper. I believed him. Until today. Jasmine gave her a moment, then asked the final question. Why now? Ivanka took a long breath. Because I saw her. Valentina? She nodded. She looked at him with the same fear I used to hide behind makeup, and she didn't flinch. I did. She stood up. I stayed seated. She became the mirror, and I couldn't live with the reflection anymore. The room was quiet, no outrage, no condemnation, only grief in its terrible honesty. Jasmine closed the file. Thank you, Miss Trump, for finally stepping forward. Ivanka didn't respond. She stood slowly, placed the letter back on the table, and whispered as she left, I was never the first daughter. I was just the first to disappear. And as the door shut behind her, the entire chamber understood one final truth. What shattered here today was not just a woman. It was the myth of control. But myths don't die alone. The next morning, long before the chamber reopened, Jasmine Crockett arrived with a flash drive in hand and a warning in her voice. What we saw yesterday, she said to the committee chair, was the wound. Today, we follow the scar. The lights dimmed once more. The screen lit up, not with surveillance, not with grainy offshore footage, but with something far more disturbing in its normality. A press event in the Oval Office, one that aired live 5 years ago. Donald Trump seated at the resolute desk, flanked by flags. Cameras clicked, reporters leaned forward. He held a pen in his right hand, poised to sign an executive order titled the Legacy Expansion Act. But no one noticed what was behind him. Until now. Jasmine hit pause. The camera freeze frame was enhanced. And there it was, Ivanka Trump seated directly behind him. Closer than any cabinet member, closer even than the vice president. She wore a navy suit and heels, but that wasn't the detail that mattered. What mattered was her hand, resting on the back of his chair, fingers lightly curled, and on the ring finger, a gold band, thin, plain, undeniably a wedding ring. The room held its breath. Jasmine continued, her voice a scalpel. This wasn't a one-time slip. We found 12 other instances, press events, bill signings, diplomatic ceremonies, where Ivanka was positioned within what the Secret Service calls a spousal perimeter, not advisory, not ceremonial, spousal. She clicked again. A slideshow began, image after image. Ivanka, always seated behind the president, always just off center, always wearing the ring, and then came the personnel logs. One entry, one name. Escort detail, primary, Trump Ivanka, code name Crown. Assigned January 18, 2018. Status, POTUS spouse security tier 1. The room collapsed into whispers. A senator muttered, that can't be real. Another leaned toward the screen, squinting at the code label. Tier 1? That's reserved for legal spouses of sitting presidents. Jasmine didn't flinch. It gets worse. She opened a transcript from a Secret Service debriefing. Agent 4293, codename Shiloh. Anonymous until this morning, he wrote, in 3 separate instances during 2018-2019, I received direct orders from the West Wing to provide full spousal protection to Ivanka Trump. I protested. Protocol required clearance from the First Lady's office. I was told, and I quote, that line has been redefined. Escort the president's wife accordingly. The committee chair exhaled. And Melania? Jasmine turned the page. Records show that Melania's public appearances dropped to 0 within 5 days of the first spouse Tier 1 reclassification. Her East Wing staff was cut in half. Her security detail reassigned. Another agent's log was shown. When I asked why Ivanka was riding in the First Lady's armored motorcade, I was told, the role has shifted. Don't ask again. Jasmine's voice dropped now. Not for effect, but because the weight of what she was about to say demanded stillness. They didn't just hide the marriage. They wrote it into government process. They normalized it through seating charts, security codes, press releases, and silence. Ivanka wasn't just the daughter. She was the wife on record, the First Lady, without the title, without the vote, without the consent of the people. She let it hang in the air like smoke. The American public never noticed, because they were never meant to. A senator leaned forward, hands shaking. So when we thought Melania was stepping back, she wasn't, Jasmine said. She was erased. The screen returned to the image of Trump signing the executive order. Ivanka behind him, hand resting on the chair, ring gleaming beneath the lights. And it no longer looked like a daughter supporting her father. It looked like a wife watching her kingdom unfold. Jasmine took a breath. He didn't redefine family. He rewrote power. And he slipped it right under our Constitution, one soft smile at a time. The chair spoke, barely above a whisper. What are we looking at? Jasmine answered without pause. A presidency that wore incest like a crown. No one moved. Not the senators, not the aides, not even the cameras, which continued to roll in reverent silence, broadcasting disbelief in real time to a nation that no longer had the language to describe what it was witnessing. But inside the West Wing, movement had begun. By the time the hearing adjourned for the evening, 12 sealed envelopes had been delivered to the Speaker of the House, each signed, time-stamped, and notarized by hand. 12 cabinet members, including the Secretary of Defense, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of State, had submitted formal declarations under Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. The declaration said, in nearly identical phrasing, the President of the United States is no longer fit to discharge the powers and duties of his office. His conduct, personal, financial, constitutional, represents a sustained and demonstrable inability to uphold his oath. They were not resignations. They were revolts, surgical, bipartisan, and deliberate. The signatures came from both sides of the aisle. Trump loyalists, career appointees, even his most ardent defenders had crossed the threshold between protection and preservation. Because whatever came next, they didn't want to be in the same room or the same history book as what stayed behind. When the news broke, the Capitol held its breath. For a brief moment, the political machine froze in paradox. The party that had built the walls around Trump had just walked out the front door. But the moment was not without fracture. In the Senate chamber, Republican leaders argued constitutional ambiguity. Democratic voices called it a moral necessity. Some shouted, "Let the voters decide." Others whispered, "We may not survive until then." One called it a schism. Fox called it a trap. The streets called it too late. And yet, all eyes turned back to Jasmine. The next day, she stood before the Joint Oversight Committee, not as a prosecutor, not as a partisan, but as something more terrifying to men like Trump, a mirror that refused to break. She wore black, no jewelry, no notes, just a pin on her lapel that read, Valentina. She stepped to the mic. "You have all read the letters," she said. 12 cabinet members, pillars of this administration, now say the president is unfit, not because they disagree with his politics, but because they have finally met the man behind the myth, and what they saw was not a leader. She scanned the room. What they saw was a throne without a soul, a system built on secrecy, shame, and bloodlines. And they couldn't hold it up anymore. Senator interrupted. This is still premature. The vice president hasn't responded. Jasmine nodded. He will, because history is standing outside his office with a stopwatch. She let the silence settle, then delivered the line that would be carved into history. This isn't about party. This is about purging our conscience. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. It landed like thunder anyway. Jasmine continued, for too long, we've asked the Constitution to carry more than it was designed for, to hold the weight of corruption, compromise, cowardice. But the Constitution is not a shield. It's a mirror. And right now, it's showing us what we've become. Across the aisle, several lawmakers looked down, not from guilt, but from the unbearable awareness of having no defense left. Jasmine's voice didn't shake. You can call this a coup if it helps you sleep, but this isn't a coup, it's a correction. A self-defense mechanism from a republic gasping for breath beneath the weight of a crown it never agreed to wear. She stepped away from the mic. A moment passed, then the chair rose. We acknowledge receipt of 12 declarations. We await the vice president's response. In the event of concurrence, the president shall be deemed unable to discharge the duties of his office. Under law, succession will commence immediately. The room fell into stunned quiet, not the silence of disbelief, the silence of inevitability. And somewhere in the East Wing, behind bolted doors, Donald Trump sat alone in the private study once used by Abraham Lincoln, watching a monitor, clutching a gold pen, and breathing like a man finally hearing the footsteps he always knew would come. The pen trembled in his hand. It wasn't fear, it was fury. The kind that didn't shout at once, but boiled until it begged for cameras, for stage, for spotlight. Because in his mind, if he could still perform, he could still control. At 9:03 a.m., reporters were summoned with no notice. A press alert simply read, "The president will speak. East Room." No script, no teleprompter, no prepared remarks. The podium was wheeled in by hand. They expected denial or distraction. What they got was combustion. He stormed in, hair unkempt, eyes wild, breath ragged. Behind him, two aides trailed like prisoners with no say in their own march. He didn't greet the room. He didn't wait for the cameras to adjust. He leaned into the mic and detonated. I made her. I protected her. The world didn't deserve her. Gasps. Blinking. Phones whipped into the air. Reporters frozen, pens in hand, but too stunned to write. You think I'm the monster? He snarled. You think Jasmine Crockett is a patriot? She's a nobody, a noise, a jealous liar. He pointed directly at the first row. She doesn't know our love. She doesn't understand legacy. She never built anything. I built her. I built all of you. A reporter tried to interrupt. Mr. President, are you admitting? Shut up, he bellowed. You're not entitled to my truth. You never were. I didn't marry a daughter. I married my empire. I secured the throne. That girl was mine. She trusted me. She was destined. He was shaking now, not from illness, but from a rage that had no room left to hide. You think it's about blood? It's about survival. It's about keeping this country from the hands of weaklings and snakes and cowards like you. Aide number 1 reached forward, whispering something into his ear. Trump shoved him off. You don't touch me. You don't correct me. I gave you peace. I gave you time. I gave you her. The room spun in disbelief. The sound crew muted the microphones. But not before his last line burst through the feed like a cursed confession. You think I corrupted the system? No. I was the system. And now you're trying to erase me because I loved her more than you could love this country. It was over in 2 minutes and 46 seconds. The clip hit national airwaves in under 90 seconds. In 11 minutes, it had over 9 million views. Within the hour, it reached Europe. By noon, it hit China. At 1:12 p.m., a major U.S. military base issued a readiness alert, not from foreign threat, but in anticipation of executive instability. The footage wasn't just embarrassing, it was destabilizing. The President of the United States had, on live television, admitted to acts of incestuous obsession cloaked in the language of nationalism, and he had done it from a government podium. By 4:30 p.m., a joint emergency session was called behind locked doors. The Vice President refused comment, but his chief counsel submitted a single-sentence memo. The conditions necessary to activate Article 4 of the 25th Amendment have been met in full. By 6:00 p.m., the lawmakers from both parties were drafting language for an emergency impeachment resolution, not for political disagreement, but for psychological unfitness. Legal scholars called it the first breakdown of constitutional behavior on camera. Psychiatrists called it the unraveling of unchecked delusion. The people called it too late but necessary. That night, on the Capitol steps, Jasmine Crockett made no speeches. She gave no interviews. But as reporters hounded her for comment, she simply held up a still frame from the press conference. Trump, red-faced, mouth open mid-scream, finger pointing at nothing. And beneath it, one sentence, handwritten on the margin in her pen. The man who would not kneel to law just collapsed before a camera. And across the nation, from quiet diners to angry streets, one thought was finally, terrifyingly unanimous. If this is how he ends, what does that say about how we let him begin? By dawn, the Capitol was barricaded, not out of fear of attack, but because history has a gravitational pull, and millions felt it dragging them toward the edge. The impeachment resolution had been finalized in the early hours, crisp, brutal, and clear. Resolved that Donald John Trump, President of the United States, is impeached for high crimes against the Constitution, the nation, and the moral foundation of its people. No room left for metaphor, no time left for performance. The only thing that mattered now was the count. Inside the chamber, the tension was feral. Seats were filled, cell phones silenced, eyes fixed not on opponents but on screens, on votes, on names about to be etched into textbooks and burned into memory. Across the aisle, Trump's loyalists whispered frantically, some praying, some calculating. Others simply stared, knowing what was coming, and still unable to stop it. Whips moved up and down the rows, counting, flipping, threatening. Some tried to delay the session. Others floated the prospect of censure, not removal. But it was too late for soft landings. The clip had already spread. Just after noon, it leaked. No watermark, no warning. Just a video file titled, Room 113, March 17th, 2011. It was grainy, silent. Security cam angle. Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump. A private penthouse office in Trump Tower. She was trying to leave. He was standing in front of the door, one hand on her wrist, the other on her waist. Her face said everything. His said nothing. And then, as she turned to pull away, he slammed her into the wall. His mouth moved. Her head dropped. She didn't scream. She froze. The clip was 12 seconds long. It didn't need a second more. By the time it reached the floor, 2 senators had already switched their vote. One fainted. Another walked out and never came back. Inside the chamber, the chair rose. The time had come. This body will now proceed with a full vote on the impeachment of the President of the United States. Roll call began. The names moved like stones, skipping across a glass lake. Ayes, nays, ayes, ayes, ayes. Some whispered, some shouted, some couldn't finish without choking. The count climbed. The wall crumbled. When the tally hit 400, the room began to shift. Not audibly, not visibly, but something invisible moved, like a curse lifting or a fever breaking. 423, ayes, 12. Noes, 0 present. Impeachment passed. The gavel hit once, no applause, no cheers, only silence. Then the chair's voice, solemn, heavy. Donald John Trump is hereby impeached by the United States House of Representatives. The words dropped like bricks into water. Outside, a single bell from St. Joseph's Cathedral rang, unscheduled, unclaimed. It didn't matter. The nation had heard it anyway. Inside the chamber, Jasmine Crockett didn't speak. She didn't smile. She simply placed a single white lily on her desk next to her binder. It wasn't symbolic. It was sacramental. One of Trump's allies stood and shouted across the aisle, "You've destroyed the country." Jasmine finally looked up and said, "No, we just stopped mistaking it for a kingdom." Cameras caught it, pinned it, etched it, and somewhere in a corner of the suite with drawn curtains and torn documents, the 45th president sat, no longer in control of the room, the country, or the story. He reached for the television remote, but there was nothing left to change. The next morning, the presidential seal above the East Room podium was already half draped in black velvet. The flag flew at half-mast, not for a death, but for a presidency that had finally stopped pretending it was anything else. At precisely 8 a.m., Jasmine Crockett stepped onto the Capitol steps. No entourage, no teleprompter, no makeup, just a microphone and a nation running out of air. The silence was deafening. Even the birds seemed to pause. She looked into the camera and spoke like she had never needed permission to. "He didn't destroy the presidency. He dismantled our silence." Her voice cut through the fog like floodlights. Calm, measured, final. For too long, we normalized the whispers. We buried the rumors. We built power on the bones of unspoken truths. But silence doesn't keep us safe. It keeps us sick. Her words echoed across television sets, subway platforms, church pews, and military bases. He didn't hide a secret. He built a government out of it. And still, she didn't blink. This wasn't just one man's fall. This was a mirror shattering in every American home. And now we all have to pick up the pieces. She stepped back. No fanfare, no applause, just reality pressing forward like morning light through stained glass. By noon, Donald Trump submitted his resignation letter to the Speaker of the House. It was brief, emotionless, typed. Just 3 lines. "Effective immediately, I hereby resign the office of President of the United States. For the sake of national continuity, Donald J. Trump." There was no ceremony, no farewell address. He left through a side door of the White House, head low, collar up, eyes hidden. As he passed the Marine sentry, the guard did not salute. The door shut behind him, and America exhaled. But history had one more breath to hold. That same afternoon, in the now infamous hearing room, the door creaked open one last time. She walked in, quiet, poised, dressed in white. Ivanka Trump. She approached the same table where she once sat behind a mask of power and secrecy. Her heels echoed like punctuation. Every camera in the chamber held its breath. She said nothing. She simply removed the gold ring from her finger, placed it gently on the mahogany wood, and slid it forward. The sound it made was so soft it was almost holy. Then she turned and walked out. No security escort, no whispered commands, no goodbye, just her leaving the very stage she had once been forced to play on. But the final voice didn't belong to her. It came from the youngest witness, the one who had never asked to be born into legacy, scandal, or silence. Valentina. She stepped forward, slow and calm, wearing a simple black dress and a stare that didn't blink. She looked into the microphone and spoke the last line of the long, fractured story. "You called me a mistake, but I just watched you become history." The room didn't move, because sometimes the loudest sound in democracy is when truth finally stops asking for permission. And in the days that followed, America didn't celebrate. It didn't rejoice. It remembered. Not the scandal, but the silence that made it possible. And from that silence, finally came the sound of something beginning. When the dust settled, there was no anthem, no speech, just the sound of a country learning how to be honest again. Jasmine disappeared from headlines. Valentina didn't. She became the face of something more powerful than scandal. Survival without shame. And when someone finally asked her what she hoped people would learn, she said this: "The worst things in the world don't start with monsters. They start with people we refuse to question. And silence isn't neutral. It's permission. She looked into the lens, not like a victim, but like someone who had earned the right to speak. If something feels wrong, speak anyway. Even if your voice shakes, even if no one claps. Because truth isn't about being loud, it's about being early. And just like that, a nation once defined by what it refused to say finally learned what it meant to listen. And maybe the next time silence dares to rise, in a home, a boardroom, a nation, someone somewhere will remember this. Don't wait for someone else to do the right thing. Be the first. That's how silence ends, and how something better begins. If this story stirred something in you, don't scroll. Pause. Reflect. Share it with someone who still confuses silence with peace. Tag someone who believes power without accountability is still power. Send it to anyone taught to keep their voice down, even when their truth was burning. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where no secret stays sacred and no silence goes unchallenged. Hit the bell, because the next story won't ask for permission. It will ask what you are willing to live with. This is a fictional dramatization inspired by real patterns of control, complicity, and courage. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental or painfully accurate. Thanks for watching. Truth isn't loud, but it lasts. This is Harrison Stories.